Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now, here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Episode 55 of the Are We Idiots Show. Welcome again, everyone. We are your hosts, as always, Richard Kroll and Marcus Weaver.
I can drive
55.
55.
Sammy Hagar. So 55, Rich. We've done as many shows as I have years on this earth.
Does that mean
and next episode will be as many as your years on this earth.
Should we do one a year now to keep even with our years?
I want to keep going. We're doing well. And speaking of doing well, we have a new patron, Michael Smalls, a good friend of both of ours. But Mike, thank you for your patronage. And we need more patrons. By the way, Rich, your lecture to your friends that they didn't read your email, did they ever come back to you?
Nobody listens to me.
Oh, my goodness. All right. We need more patrons, folks. Thank you, Mike Smalls. And by the way, our other patrons, Eric Weaver, Mary Ellen Weaver Real Estate. If you need real estate in Pennsylvania or New Jersey, contact Mary Ellen. That's Mary Ellen with an I, by the way. Chris Barbie and Scott Carney. We always like to thank our patrons. We need more. Be a part of what we're doing here. We'd appreciate that. Richie, you have a tip of the day for our wonderful listeners?
Yes, before I give my tip of the day, I do want to shout out to Mike Smalls. He is the best and most reasonable, yet motivating vice president of sales I ever worked for. 4 different jobs. I worked under Mike 4 different jobs. He's now the CEO of Hoopla Software. They do a lot of gamification, really cool stuff to motivate sales teams with Salesforce and other CRMs. Great guy, now living in San Jose, California. God bless Mike Smalls.
And also of note, was my former next-door neighbor for many years, and our kids grew up together, so his lovely wife, Julie, as well. So, yeah, good family, good person, and also a good patron.
Yes, let's not forget Julie. It takes a good woman to create a good man.
Is that your tip of the day?
That is not, but it could be. Here's my tip of the day, folks. We've talked a lot about nutrition, exercise, dieting, the new science behind it all. Here's a little fact I want to throw at all you men over 40. Our testosterone has unfortunately been depleting 1% to 2% since we were 30. That's why some of you guys have no muscle mass, like Mark Weaver, who his wife even called slight a couple years ago.
I've not gotten over that yet, by the way.
You shouldn't. And he's got no pipes. He's a good athlete, but he's got no musculature. Here's the deal.
Mine started when I was 20, I guess.
Yes, it did.
The decline.
You unfortunately had a condition that's called lack of testosterone,
and I'm not even Italian.
And you're not even Italian. Listen, folks, and I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting, but don't get caught up in fad diets, which eliminate all carbs and all fats, because the key to our metabolism is actually testosterone. The more testosterone in our system, the more fat-burning hormones we have. Now, guess what helps boost your testosterone after 40? Good fats. That includes true olive oil, coconut oil, avocado.
Lard.
Well, not lard.
Crisco oil.
Crisco.
Just a spoonful of Crisco.
Olean. Remember Olean, whatever it was? Nuts like almonds and walnuts. So, folks, men, don't be afraid of the good fats. Don't listen to your whoever. They're telling you to avoid those.
Didn't we have a diet and exercise show where we went all through this?
We did, but I left that part out.
Oh, okay. I thought you touched on that a little bit, didn't we?
If I did, I'm repeating myself because I am 56 years old.
That's a good tip of the day, Richie. And on our show today, we have the Idiot of the Week, which I have some good nominees. And then we're going to talk about what we termed the show the college admissions scandal, but it's also known as the Varsity Blues scandal. That was the code name the government used.
Was that a movie?
It was a movie. Do you remember the movie?
Football movie.
Yeah. Do you remember who was... I'll give you bonus points if you can name one of the stars of the movie.
Tall, blonde-haired guy.
That's a good guess. Yeah.
I guess that
James Vanderbeek.
James Vander what?
Vander
Slyke.
Beek. Vander Beek.
Vander Beek.
He was also slight, and but no testosterone, obviously. He was leaking. By the way, John Voight was also in that movie, and the late, may he rest in peace, Paul Walker, the guy who got killed with driving his
Yes,
Porsche into a
unfortunate
pole at 200 miles an hour or something.
Young Death. Was that also a TV series?
I don't know that.
Okay.
But anyhow, we're going to talk about the Varsity Blues scandal, and then we're going to conclude the show with famous coach quotes. Rich knows a lot about sports and coaches and that type of thing. So I'm going to give him the quote, or two maybe, and he's going to try to guess the famous coach who said it.
Although I noticed I'm getting dumber. Like I'm forgetting things.
Well, we've all known that for a while.
I'm slowly degrading. Even when I watch Jeopardy, I could normally rattle. I don't know half the answers anymore.
I found myself watching Jeopardy. There's some shows where I know, 80%, and then some shows where I know like 10. I mean, it's really stark. I mean, to me, it's not like I know half each show. It's I know 80% one show and like nothing the next show.
I don't expect you to know 17th century English literature.
I know a lot of soft science stuff.
You are getting better.
Soft science and economics. Beyond that,
you're getting better even at hard science.
No. All right, Richie. So I have some pretty good, I love, it's probably my favorite part of the show each week, the Idiots of the Week. I'm glad you convinced me to do this as part of the show. All right, Richie. In Moore Park, California, a big rig truck driver has been arrested after authorities spotted a phony license plate on his rig. How could they tell? I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let you, you're very good at this, Rich. I'm going to let you describe the phony license plate to the listeners to see if possibly they could have, how could they have, the great undercover detective work.
Folks. So I've done a little forgery in my life. There was a time, I hate to admit it, but when I was in college, all my friends were born in 1963. And back before they were really tough and difficult on licensing, I was also an artist, as you know.
Yes.
And I found the exact color match of the sandy yellow paint for the numerals and the light olive green background, and I was able to convert the 63s into 60s. Hence, a lot of us
into bars.
We could get into
illegal
bars
IDs
a couple years early. So with that, I'm looking at a forgery of a license plate. Where
did you do that, or your daughter?
If
Kaylee?
I did this, we would have all been sent to jail. Bouncers would have caught us immediately.
The top is the best.
The CALIFAS. It's
supposed to be a California license plate.
Califas. The numbers are all uneven and out of like different fonts. It's handwritten by like my 10-year-old daughter. It literally looks like a cartoon.
But you don't even spell the name of the state right. It's Califas.
It's not even close.
Calif.
I mean, not even it's not spelled correctly.
It's a wonder he got pulled over, isn't it?
I think it's like an island in the Caribbean somewhere.
Anyhow, the Department of
Is it even the right colors?
The department said Monday that a motorcycle officer spotted the plate and pulled the driver over in the city of Moore Park, northwest of Los Angeles. The driver was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence of drugs, possession of methamphetamine, and being an unlicensed driver and having an arrest warrant out. The tractor trailer he was towed away was towed away by authorities because it was unsafe. I'm guessing it wasn't inspected either.
Good guess. He would have been better off having no license plate at all.
Exactly. Or how about this? Steal one. There's junkyards all over the place. You can just go rip a tag off of it. Anyhow, that's nominee number one. Nominee number two, and a quote: attack squirrel housed in an Alabama apartment and fed methamphetamines by its owner to make sure it stayed aggressive was rescued Monday by officials. The squirrel was removed from the alleged drug den by investigators following a bust at an apartment in Athens. One man, identified as Ronnie Reynolds, was arrested at the scene, but the Limestone County Sheriff's Office is still looking for another suspect, the alleged caretaker of the squirrel, identified as Mickey Polk, The sheriff's office said that prior to the drug raid, officials were told Paul kept an attack squirrel in his home. It is illegal in Alabama to have a pet squirrel. That's
alone.
That's the most surprising part of this. Is
That's
you can't
bizarre
have a
in
pet
itself.
squirrel. I thought anything went in Alabama. Officials found the squirrel and released it into the wild per a recommendation of the Department of Conservation. There was no safe way to test the squirrel for meth, the sheriff's office said. Anyhow, Rich, I don't want to read the rest of the article because it's so ridiculous. But did you know it was illegal in Alabama to
I'm
keep
shocked.
a pet squirrel?
I didn't think any type of animal was illegal to house in Alabama.
Anyhow, the guy's still on the caretaker is still on the loose.
You know, I got to say, these guys are ingenious because a good attack dog or guard dog, breed it properly can cost a lot of money. It's a lot of upkeep. It's easy to keep a squirrel. And I'll tell you, if you think about all the movies, squirrels have been used as frightening animals.
Yeah.
Like even
They're
in,
rats with tails. That's what they are.
not European, Christmas Vacation.
Right, yeah.
The squirrel comes out of the tree and everybody jumps up on the chairs and tables scared. You give me a squirrel hyped up on meth, I'm not robbing the house. The noise it makes and the scampering, they're already skitterbrained, and I think it's an ingenious idea.
I'd like to have video of someone, a squirrel actually hyped up on meth attacking someone. That would be funny, especially the caretaker.
I love it.
So what's your verdict there, or what's your commentary
I
around
actually
these two
think
nominees?
It's a great idea, and I'm
You're kind of impressed?
I'm impressed, actually. I wouldn't have thought of meth. I would have come up with something, maybe cocaine or...
and who would have thought it would have happened in Alabama? What are the odds?
I would have expected Florida, actually.
Florida's been... I didn't use the one I sent you in the text group, the guy who was having sex with pool toys.
That was a good one. We may have to use that one a future date. It's got to be the adult who hand wrote a license plate that looks like a third grader did it. A third grader might have spelled California better. It's so amazing that someone, and it probably took him an hour, 2 hours to do. And
Caliphas.
And when he was done with it, he looked at it and goes, "Hey, this looks pretty good."
Caliphas. What is Caliphas?
What is Caliphas?
I don't know.
It's an island just off the coast of Honduras.
All right, so you're going to send him the. Well, he probably needs more than $1 because he's in jail.
I'll give him $1.50. I'm going to up it this week.
All right, if I can contain my chuckling and my giggling, I'm going to transition to our main topic of the day, which is the college admissions bribery scandal, otherwise known as the Varsity Blues scandal or Varsity Blues operation. And here's basically what happened. There's this guy, Rick Singer is his name, and he realized that baby boomer parents are awful and coddling and overindulgent of their kids, and particularly really rich ones are ripe for ripping off by under the guise of trying to help their kids, and we'll talk about whether they're really doing it for their kids or themselves later. But essentially, he set up two different ways to have rich parents help their kids get into college fraudulently. The first one was on cheating on SATs and ACTs. And there was hundreds and hundreds of parents that were involved in this, by the way, since 2011. And the main two ways he did this was he would have kids get fraudulent disability diagnosis from a doctor. They'd pay the doctors $4,000 or $5,000. And so the kids would get extra accommodations to take the test. So they would say
because they're mentally challenged?
Right. They have a learning disability, and now the kid gets to take twice as long for the SAT, or they can have a helper, or they can bring in whatever. They lots of different things.
And the doctor's in on it as well.
Oh, yeah. The doctor's getting paid on the table. Right.
Bribery.
So that bribery. And so they would do that. And then when they would have people that would intercept those tests or help them out and fill it out for them. This one guy was a Harvard grad. He was just really smart, and he would be paid $10,000 per test to take it and just fill it out. He also controlled multiple test centers. One was in Houston, one was in California, I think, whatever. but where he kind of controlled what went on there. And so he would have the parents set up fraudulent travel to go to where the test centers were, so they could have their kids take the test there. And sometimes the kids were in on it, and sometimes the kids weren't. But the bottom line is that was really prevalently used, this ACT, SAT cheating. The second thing, which really got the most attention in all this, was, and this is where the Varsity Blues reference comes in, he would conjure up fake sports credentials. So, your kid who never picked up a tennis racket in his life could get into Georgetown on a tennis scholarship because he had many big-time university coaches on the take. And so we all know this, that when you're an athlete, we've known this for forever. When you're an athlete, you get special entry privileges into a college. You don't have to have the same criteria as anyone else because you're an athlete. I mean, you've known this, right? We've all known this for decades.
Absolutely.
Right? There's a different standard for athletes. The coach puts your name on a list, hands it over to admissions, and they get lax treatment. They get in. And so this is what was going on. So there was a number, I won't go through all of them, but just to give you an idea, the Yale women's soccer coach collected $400,000. The USC associate athletic director, $1.3 million. The volleyball coach there, I think, was $500,000. The Georgetown tennis coach, which I just mentioned, $950K. So essentially, what happened was the coaches would say, "Yeah, I got a slot. I got 10 people every year I can put on. I'll just use one of them for one of your guys, and no one will ever pick up on it." And so that's, before we go any further and talk about some of the people that were involved in this, Richie, this guy, Rick Singer, he found a business opportunity. And by the way, Rick Singer got caught, and he helped the FBI collect evidence on all these people. So he was a cooperating witness in all this. So it's kind of fitting that these people, indicted themselves because they all were, being taped by this guy who set them up to begin with. Thoughts?
Well, a million thoughts are running through my head. A couple of them are, if these people that are clearly intelligent manipulators actually spent their time on legitimate business practices, how much better could our world be? You got all these fraudulent, corrupt people scamming systems, coming up with schemes to figure it out, and most of them ultimately get caught. What if they just put their time, energy, and effort, like hackers, towards the betterment of the world, right? That's the first, come on, guys. Really, is it that much worth your ultimate going to jail or fines or your reputation being ruined forever? It's crazy to me these people think they can get away with it forever. The second is, if I'm a kid, I'm pretty pissed off at my mom or dad for basically passing me as mentally challenged.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that to later, but we can talk about that now. So I was going to talk about the parents first and then the kids. But let's talk about
throwing thoughts out.
No, let's talk about the kids. So I think.
Oh, but I had one more thought off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that it's potentially easy for a college coach to slice off one of their scholarships and give it away unnoticed, but not necessarily, right? A lot of these scholarships are precious. Depending on the sport, they really don't get a full allotment of scholarships, or they get partial scholarships. There's some kid that is picking his second choice of college, or maybe going from D1 to D2 because they're giving this away to somebody fraudulently for some idiot kid that can't take care of themselves. So that's another thought that came to my head. But the first one, hysterically, is, really, Mom, Dad, you are passing me as mentally challenged to help get me into this school? That would break my trust, and I'd be pissed off for a lifetime.
Well, yeah. So let's go there, because that was something we were going to talk about, but we might as well now. So, yeah. So that my main thought is, first of all, let me respond to you on the coaches thing. I think that most of these coaches, this is not like Mike Krzyzewski or all these big time football coaches. They won't waste a scholarship for this kind of stuff. But these are, volleyball, women's soccer, rugby, there was water polo, there's tennis at Georgetown. Like, no one cares, right? So that's
Except
probably
for the kid who loses the
well,
scholarship.
that's a whole different thing because I agree with you on it's not just sports stars. There was other admission stuff here too. Yeah, there's plenty of victims here, and it's the people who try to do things the legitimate way. But we'll get into that.
But that's like saying,
but
how many people want to live to 100? Ask the guy who's 99. How many people care about these scholarships? Ask the kid that lost a scholarship fraudulently.
Right.
Did I
okay.
pronounce it?
But
Fraud-
okay, and here's where I'll throw a twist into it. This is wrong. No doubt it's wrong. And there's lots of victims, these people that you didn't get the scholarships that these guys threw away. But what's the difference between what's been going on for 100 years where donors get their kids in? They don't have to have the same thing. Alumni, everyone knows that if you're an alumni kid, you have a much better chance of getting in as a legacy. That's been going on for 50 years. So there is no such thing as a kind of equal system. It's always been bogus.
There's no bribes changing hands, and I think that's what gets people going.
Of course there is. What do you think? When people put their names on buildings, you think Trump's kids at Penn had to have the same?
I'm not talking about Trump with people's names on buildings. I'm talking about an alumnus. The alumnus didn't pay $50,000 or $2 million to get their kid in.
But people who don't donate to colleges, they absolutely do that. And alumnus, it is
I don't think that's the same category.
It's very close. It's morally the same. It basically
morally maybe, but I see favors with we all do each other favors. I mean, so as long as if the alumnus or the donor is paying an extra $1 million just to get the kid in on top of everything else, then that would be an equal stance.
Well, it's never like that direct quid pro quo, but it's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I mean, this has been going on for 100 years.
Like country clubs. If you're a child of a father who's a member of a country club, you get in.
And you not only get in, you get in at half price.
Right.
So I'm saying there is no such thing as a level playing field, and this is just one more iteration of it.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, but this is a level way above all that.
All right. So let's talk about some of the victims. Some of the perpetrators. So the most famous is Aunt Becky from Full House, Lori Loughlin.
Aunt Becky.
I
know her well.
House,
I don't know her personally well.
Lori Loughlin. And her husband is this famous fashion designer. They paid $500,000 to this guy, Rick Singer, for their two daughters to be portrayed as rowing on the rowing team at USC. So first of all, my first question is, USC, if we have any listeners out there that went to USC, I hope I don't offend you too much. USC is not exactly Yale. Why would you pay $500,000 to get your kids in? If you're going to pay $500,000, get them into Stanford. You know what I mean? Like, or even UCLA is probably a better school than USC. I mean, USC is a kind of a above average school, but nothing spectacular.
You raise a great question. I mean, I don't know
that's a bad value choice.
Yeah, I don't know how impactful having a Trojan diploma means. Yeah, that one threw me off.
And by the way, this is also the girl who, one of the daughters is an Instagram star, and she was the one, I think you even read Idiot of the Week thing back months ago when this came out, that she wasn't even sure she wanted to go to college. And here, the parents are paying $500,000. There was Felicity Huffman, who was a star from Desperate Housewife. Her husband, William H. Macy, famous actor. And there's CEOs across the board. There's lots of rich people. You can go online and read the wiki about it, but there's tons of named CEOs and bigwigs all over this. But I guess it brings up my question, Rich, is you've heard me say on other shows that I think the baby boom generation have proven overall, obviously there's exceptions, to be pretty poor parents.
Helicopter parents,
producing overindulged kids that get 10th place trophies. You've ranted on it as well. And is this not the manifestation of how bad parents can act in overindulging their kids? I mean, I can't even think of other instances in public life where people have embarrassed their kids so much. But I'm with you. If I was one of these kids and I wasn't in on it, which evidently most of them weren't, I don't know that I could get over this because you're already famous. Your parents are famous, so you're famous. You're all over the news. You may have even legitimately been able to get into USC because USC is not a tall ask. But now it's presumed that you're an idiot and you couldn't have got in without it. And your parents did this to you. I mean,
well, it's even more embarrassing than that. And you came in as a member of the crew team under scholarship, and you can't even pick up an oar. Right. So it's even worse. It's blown out of proportion in an embarrassing, humiliating way. And I always said you and I were months ahead of our time.
Even weeks sometimes.
Sometimes days as well. For us to do the helicopter parenting and then this come out after is pretty serendipitous.
There we go.
I knew you like big words.
Can't spell that, though.
No, I can't either. So it's unbelievable that parents can't accept who their kids are, and kids can't do their own work. Or maybe they can, but they're not even given a chance in this case. I don't know the background. Like you said, maybe she could have got into USC anyway. Or worst case, maybe she would have got into Pepperdine or UC Santa Barbara or whatever. Like, okay, not bad.
But it goes back to my premise on I don't know if it was the college show or I forget exactly. It might have been one of the personal finance shows where kids are being forced through peer pressure and parents are overspending on college and sending kids to college that shouldn't go because of peer pressure and how it makes them feel about themselves. And that's really, at the end of the day, I think that's what these selfish parents did. Is they did it because they wanted to be able to tell their friends, my kid's going to USC on a rowing scholarship or whatever. I mean, I don't think it was for the kids. And when you try to psychoanalyze it, these are egomaniac rich people who really are just it's another status symbol that they're trying to buy.
Well, that part of human nature I get. I don't agree with it, but I get it. If you're the parent of the 10-year-old girl who bats 11th in the softball game and always strikes out, you're just praying she does something, right? And then you think it's a reflection of you. Maybe parents think I'm not working with her and trying to make her better. Maybe she's just a bad athlete because I was, and I got to improve upon that. And then some people, their ego just can't let them accept facts as the way they are. And this is crazy because I keep thinking about, either the kid's lazy or just dumb or,
overindulged
or was partier and didn't care about SAT scores. But, the fact that you have to take it to a mentally challenged level is so insulting, humiliating to the kid, right? I mean, in the helicopter parenting episode, we talked about at an early age, parents, when their kid goes to bed, proofreading their homework and correcting the mistakes.
Right.
So it was this doesn't help anybody.
Doing projects for them.
This doesn't help anybody. Then you release them into the wild and they're clueless.
Right. Well, I'm lucky in that I am unburdened by what other people think. So in my case, I can really care less what people think, and that's a nice way to go through life. So I don't really care what people think about me or my kids. So
you'd be surprised what they say.
I don't really care. That's nice. But no, it's pretty evident to me that these parents did this for themselves, for their ego, and in the irony is that they may have alienated their kids for life in trying to, quote, help their kids, which they're really helping themselves. So that's my question to you. If you were a kid and this was the situation, I mean, could you get over it? Or, I guess it depends on the individual relationship. But
I also think it depends on the explanation from the parent, right? I wouldn't be over it immediately. I'd have to look at the historical relationship I have with my parents. Was it good? Were they kind? Were they helpful? Were they always there for me? Did they mean well?
Did my nanny raise me?
Did my two nannies, my 19-year-old Swedish model, raise me properly? And
in your dreams, by the way.
Yes. And if they did, I after a while, after because all time cures all ills, right? So after this dies down and people forget about it, if I really think my parents just made an egregious error trying to help me, I'd probably get over it. But if they were historically absentee parents, egotists, self-centered, worried more about themselves, and I realized this whole situation was because they were worried more about themselves than me, it very well could alienate me for life.
I highly suspect it's the latter in most of these cases because, I just can't imagine doing that to your kids or risking them finding out. I just, for what reward? I just don't get it. All right, so that's the last thing. I'm going to flip the script on this particular subject a little bit. Here's where I'm going to have a beef with the prosecution. Some of these folks are looking at 15 and 20-year jail sentences. Some of the charges, the third charge is a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, like for money laundering, bribery, fraud. And I get it. There's victims here. But I looked up some of the stats of jail time served for real crimes, and murder, 13.4 years is the average term that someone serves for murder. 4.2 years for rape. Negligent manslaughter, 5.2 years. And some of these are like federal crimes which carry these huge jail terms. And I get it. They're awful parents, and they probably took slots away from other people, and they had to put a stain on the process of college admissions, which I argue is already stained. But, come on. 20 years sentence, 10 years minimum? That's ridiculous.
What was the average jail term for having a squirrel as a pet in Alabama?
You get a medal in Alabama for that. You don't go to jail. You get elected governor.
You don't go to jail.
Come on, isn't that ridiculous? Our criminal justice system, and that's another thing I should say to the Trumpians out there. I will give credit to Trump on the criminal justice reform that he pushed through with help of many people on the left and right, by the way. So I'll give him credit on that. But we need a lot more reform. If we're going to send these awful parents to jail for 10 years for this, come on. Put them in jail for maybe 6 months or a year. Make them pay a huge fine.
Yeah, I don't really know who is a crippled victim in this case. Okay, so who did it hurt? Well, we know it hurt some of the kids that don't get in.
Right.
That could have.
It hurt the kids.
It hurt the kids that reputation's now ruined. It hurt the kids that lost out on spots getting in because these people took their place. But other than that, what did it really hurt?
Right.
I'm trying to figure out, obviously, murder, rape, assault, burglary, financially ruining somebody. Yeah, there are real victims. But at the end of the day, is this even a jail sentence at all?
That's what I mean. You're coming around to libertarianism, Rich. Most libertarians believe that if there's no real victim, it really shouldn't be a punishable crime. For instance, possessing drugs with no intent to distribute. Why would you go to jail for that? Most libertarians say that. Well, first of all, most libertarians think drugs should be legalized, but that's a whole different issue. But I agree with you. There's not enough here to put these people in jail. Granted, slap them on the wrist, give them a huge fine so they're not as rich as they once were. That's probably where they would hurt the most, but don't put them in jail where we taxpayers have to pay more.
If anything, probably the biggest rules were broken based on NCAA college regulations. If anything, the big fines and scholarship removal or whatever
should be with the universities.
Or grants for building the new library. You don't want to hurt other kids' educations, but they should be the ones taking on the brunt of punishments.
Yeah, because the NCAA, which is another awful criminal enterprise, not legally criminal, but they're
National
just
Communist
awful.
Athletic Association.
They're just awful people. But anyhow, they should have been monitoring these coaches. What kind of systems are in place for these colleges to monitor these coaches and how they administer scholarships? That's a whole other issue.
By the way, related to that, what was... Even it wasn't University of Penn. There was a kid on the team, and everyone's like, "Why is this kid on the team? He can barely dribble." But he would show up to practice.
Well, Jerome Allen, I think, got in trouble with some
Yeah, but there was
kind
a kid. Okay, he was probably a decent basketball player, but clearly not.
He went to Penn, so he's clearly intelligent.
Clearly. Do we know anybody that got an MBA from Penn?
BBA, by the way. I did not get my MBA, just an undergrad.
Oh, okay. So what about these kids that came in with a crew scholarship or a volleyball scholarship? Did they actually show up to practice? Did they show up to team meetings? And wouldn't kids be like, well, where's Mary Ann or where's Billy Bob?
No, they never showed up to it. And actually, I didn't even get a chance to mention that. But there was a very sophisticated system that this guy, Rick Singer, had. He had a Photoshop artist, and he would take the kids' actual heads and put them on pictures
Really?
of kids actually performing sports. And they'd create these like sports bios to actually sell it to the coaches.
Wow, if I knew that.
So the coach could actually have something to like fall back on for documentation. Like, yeah, this is a legit athlete.
If I had those capabilities back in the 80s, the licenses would have been foolproof.
Oh, you would have been the man. You would be rich. You'd be retired right now.
I'd be retired.
So final comments on this segment, Richie, before we move on to the coach's quote quiz.
It is such an apropos, I'm using French now.
Oh, I like that.
Episode following up to our helicopter parenting episode, which is parents, would you give your kids a chance to succeed or fail on their own? Help them, but don't do this to your kids. It's probably mostly affluent celebrity types with the biggest egos.
And CEOs. There's a lot
My
of CEOs.
goodness. Gosh darn.
Once again, baby boomers, the worst generation that has lived yet in this country, where we've put our future in debt and been awful parents. So I'm not very proud to be a baby boomer in how we're leaving this country. We haven't made the country better like past generations, and you could say we're probably the worst parents so far. Now, let's see when the iGen and the millennials, when they're parents, what they produce. That could be really scary.
I think that'll be the scariest.
All right, Richie, so we're going to conclude the show with some quotes from coaches, and we'll see, and these are all pretty famous coaches. Well, a couple of them are maybe harder than the other, but most of them, you know all these coaches, and we'll see how you do. I'll give you one quote if you can get it with one. If you can't, I'll give you the second quote, and we'll see if you can get that. In that game, we didn't block very well, but we made up for it by not tackling. If you don't know it, I can give you the second one, which will probably give it away. But
it's funny you should say this, because in a high school football game against Chichester, the head coach after the game said, wow, Hereford High was really tough. Not only were we smaller than them, we were a lot slower. One of my favorite quotes of all time. I do know this coach, but I told you I'm getting older and dumber. Give me the second line.
When asked what he thought of his team's execution, he responded, I'm all in favor of it. Which is a classic line.
That is a great, great answer. Was that Jim Mora?
No, it's John McKay, Tampa Bay Bucks coach John McKay. That's his famous line.
That's a great one. With those light orange and tangerine uniforms.
And if you're not old enough, you didn't know the Tampa Bay Bucks were awful for about the first 10 years in the league.
Aren't they the first team to not win a game?
Right, yeah. All right. I may have to give you a hint on this one, but I'll just say this is one of the most famous coaches of all time. Things turn out best for the people who make the best of the way things turn out. And if you don't recognize that
Yogi Berra.
If you don't recognize that one,
Newt Rockney.
Be more concerned with your character than
Vince Lombardi.
than with your reputation. Your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are, which I love that line. Think basketball.
That's an intellectual coach. Phil Jackson.
No. Basketball. Who's the most famous basketball coach of all time?
Red Auerbach.
No. John Wooden. John Wooden.
You should have said college basketball.
You're not thinking. You need your ginkgo biloba. Okay, here we go. I guess the first thing I should do is thank everybody who made this day necessary. Not possible. You can observe a lot by watching. Now guess who that would
Yogi
be?
Berra.
That is Yogi Berra, yes. Next one. Perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. And then this one, which will probably give it away. Winners never quit, and quitters never win.
Vince Lombardi.
That is Vince Lombardi. You're two out of the last two. This one's a hard one. If you fail all the time, but you aren't a failure, let me start over. You fail all the time, but you aren't a failure until you start blaming someone else, which I love in this culture today. This is a tough one. I will give you his son is a defensive coordinator and has been a defensive coordinator in the National Football League for many years, but this was his father.
NFL, is this an NFL coach?
Houston coach.
Bum Phillips.
Bum Phillips is exactly right. And two more actually. Ability is what you're capable of doing. Motivation determines what you do. Attitude determines how well you do it. And I'll give you a hint. This is a college football coach, very famous.
Well, I was going to say Mr. Alabama.
It's not Nick Saban.
It's not Nick Saban?
No, it's think about in our youth.
Joe Paterno.
In our youth.
Joe Paterno.
Lou Holtz.
Lou Holtz, not Eric
That does sound like you, Lou Holtz. All right, last one. And this is kind of a tease for our next episode.
I love when you tease me.
I do that. Statistics always remind me of a fellow who drowned in a river where the average depth was only 3 feet. What
Billy Bean.
What famous college volatile football coach might have said that?
That would have to be Ohio State, Woody Hayes.
Woody Hayes is correct. And the reason I say, which is kind of funny, that that line is funny because obviously the average height in a river doesn't mean anything if you're in a spot that's 10 feet deep. But that brings up the tease is for our next show when we talk about big data. And Rich, you and I, as sports people, were probably the first ones exposed to big data in everyday life with the Moneyball. You remember that movie, Moneyball? Billy Bean. And the Oakland A's. And if anyone's ever seen Moneyball, that was really the beginning of an era of the use of big data. And of course, now all sports teams use analytics. They call it analytics now. But we're going to talk next week, next episode, on big data, not only with sports and analytics, but cookies on your browser, robo-investing.
Girl Scout cookies.
Surge and dynamic pricing, which I think you'll find that very interesting. I have some really interesting thoughts on that. And basically, all this data is being collected and it's being used. And a lot of the acquisitions now in the high-tech space around data analytics and big data. So it's going to change our life in a lot of ways, that you're probably not expecting. So we'll talk about that next episode. And as always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.